Good morning and welcome to Whiteberg Unitarian Universalist Church. We are delighted to have you here, both in this space and those attending virtually. It's good to be together, a community of youth, adults, and children sharing the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. I'm Cecilia Dodge. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of our board of directors. After today's service, please join us in our social hall, both on Zoom and in the social hall. In the social hall, you can choose our usual 20-minute small group conversations at one of the two round tables in the social hall or in the courtyard. You could also join one of the 4 centers set up in the corners of the social hall for folks of all ages. Those centers are art, soul work, story, and ritual practice. As always, we'll have cyber social hour starting at 11. You can find the link in the chat box. Thank you to all 13 WBUUC members who helped with the Habitat for Humanity Build project last week. You know who you are, and we appreciate you. Thank you also to all the people who donated to Habitat in the special collection last spring. In addition to volunteering, we gave $1,500 to Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. Thanks to all. Welcome to our church. Together we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes, for here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Ellie Rogers, and I use she, her pronouns. In 2018, in the middle of Trump's term, shortly after losing my remote job and scrambling to replace my income, and a month before moving back to Minnesota from central New York, I had a completely out-of-the-blue medical emergency, which landed me in the hospital. After the ER doctors read the dusky fortune of my CT scan, I was admitted and forced to lie down for days. There, I listened to the sweet tick of the IV drip, the reassuring monitors, the hustle beyond my room. I fell in love with my nurses who tended me endlessly, and I was a little in shock, having lost in just a few days that sense of invincibility I had as a young person. I decided the illness was a message. I needed to slow down. But once discharged from the hospital, that overpowering gratitude for my survival and for my loved ones soon gave way to a struggle between my body's recuperation and my yearning to be productive. Abandoning a half-packed box of books, filing fewer job applications, taking on less freelance work felt wrong. Submitting to a nap felt like shirking my responsibilities. I was lucky to have a tender partner who reminded me that my true work was to rest. The days I felt best were the days I let myself walk more slowly, sleep for a full night, and again in the afternoon, or go to the lake to float on my back, the water holding me up. A few years later, learning to manage a new injury, my physical therapist started me on strengthening exercises, then walked them back the next week, and then canceled them altogether. Just for now, she said. She told me I wasn't letting go enough. I had confused strength with tension. In these exercises, the release is just as important as the engagement. Without that rest, I risked further injury. So my assignment was to breathe full, restorative breaths for a week. I'll admit this felt like a standstill when I wanted forward progress. It felt too basic to be transformative, but another word for basic is foundational. I've learned my body is an alarm bell that rings when I need to slow down. To care for these two conditions, I have to go back to the basics again and again. We light the chalice this morning for the foundational practices of care and rest that we cannot bypass, and for the change they make possible in us and in the world.
Please join me in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is our lot. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I'm Reverend Jack, and I use he, him pronouns. Please rise and body your spirit for our opening hymn, Find a Stillness, number 352 in the gray hardback hymnal.
Good morning. My name is Amy and my pronouns are she, her. This morning's story is one that we tell here often. It is one of many stories from many sources of wisdom that invites us into deeper practice and into a space of wondering together who we are called to be as we grow and serve together. We hope that each time we tell a story, whether it's familiar or brand new to you, that the story comes alive in this particular place in time. A story shared today might spark something different for you than a story shared last week, last month, or last year. So I invite you to take a breath and to be present today at this moment and to wonder, what are the themes in this story that are present today in your life? What is it calling you to do? This morning's story is called Two Teachers and Tea, and it can be found in Sarah Conover's Kindness, a Treasury of Buddhist Wisdom for Children and Parents. About a century and a half ago in Japan, there lived a Zen Buddhist teacher named Nanin. One day, a university professor came to call on Nanin in the temple because he wanted to learn more about Zen. Come in for some tea, said Nanin, leading the professor into the tea room. They sat across from one another at a small, bare table. And for quite some time, the old master sat in silence, perfectly at ease. Sometimes he smiled at the professor warmly. At other times, he gazed out the window at the beauty of the gardens. But the professor grew more and more uncomfortable with the silence. He squirmed and he tapped his fingers nervously. He looked around anxiously for the tea to arrive, until finally, the professor found the silence to be simply unbearable. And so he began to fill the silence by doing what he did best. The professor cleared his throat and began to recite a lecture on Buddhism that he'd just given at the university. And the old master, Nanin, made a fine audience. He nodded in a friendly way at the professor's most outstanding points and seemed to have a look of unending curiosity. And so the professor kept right on talking. After a half hour still, no tea had arrived, but the professor was so wrapped up in his speech that he had completely forgotten about the purpose of his visit and the tea altogether. He was so consumed by his own lecture, in fact, that he didn't even notice when, at last, an attendant carried in an elegant tray and with a ceremonial teapot and 2 cups for the 2 teachers. The professor lectured on, while Nanin smiled and deliberately placed a teacup before his chattering guest, and then slowly began to pour the tea into the professor's cup. He poured and poured and poured and poured some more until finally the tea overflowed the cup and covered the table. Finally, this was enough to get the professor's attention. "What are you doing?" the professor sputtered. "Can't you see that there's no more room in this cup?" Nanin looked kindly at his visitor and replied, "Just like the cup, Professor. You too are overflowing. Let us first empty our cups. Then, together, we can learn." Thank you, Samuel. We're going to sing together number 1057 in the Teal hymnal, "Go Lift It Up," for the children and youth who are registered for our religious education programming this summer in the social hall. You'll follow us right out that way. Go lift it up.
Peace and love.
Let's pause for a moment of meditation or prayer. Gathered as we are together here, about 70 in the room, and many households joining on Zoom. Find a comfortable seat for your body, feeling grounded and rooted into this space and into this moment of time. With our roots grounded and our trunks sturdy, our branches reach toward the sky, our thoughts fly high like the birds, ringing through the atmosphere. Our hopes and prayers take flight, creating a murmuration, bumping off one another, creating space between each other, and taking on a new shape as we sit here connected together. One flock, one forest of trees. We hold in light and love today all those struggling, whether the struggle is depression, isolation, addiction, grief, loss, or the feelings that come with inevitable changes that are out of our control. We also celebrate today with all those who are celebrating family reunions, vacations, the joy that comes to us sometimes in the summer, unexpectedly and delightfully. We hold the complexity of all that we are feeling. Today, we hold in light and love our member Alan Hagstrom as he resolves challenges in his cancer treatment. We also pray for Elena, who is struggling with addiction. May she find the strength to beat this disease. And if you are holding the names of people in your life who need prayer or support, feel free to name them now out loud into this space and time. As the thoughts and prayers swirl together, we say, may it be so, and amen.
Twice a month, our offering goes to a local nonprofit, and the other Sundays, it stays right here at WBUUC to pay our staff and fund our programs and keep our lights on. We'll pass the baskets now. You can also donate on the WBUUC website by sending a check or using the text to give option printed in your order of service or in the chat box. Thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we lead together.
Our first reading is from an article in The Atlantic by Charlie Warzel and Anne Helen Peterson, excerpted from their forthcoming book, Out of Office: The Big Problem and Bigger Promise of Working from Home. We love to talk about kids' personalities, how unique and weird and joyful they are. We don't grow out of those characteristics so much as subsume them with duties. But they remain the building blocks of our humanness, the enduring difference between us and robots. We must preserve those inclinations toward delight and whimsy, toward the ineffable and the unimpressive, the feelings you can't recreate with a machine or optimize for peak productivity. They are worth rediscovering, not because they will allow us to rest and as such make us better workers, but because they anchor us to who, at heart, we've always been. The second reading is from Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic and the Mother's Day Proclamation. These are selections from The House of Rest. I will build a house of rest, square the corners every one. At each angle on his breast shall a cherub take the sun. Rising, risen, sinking, down, weaving day's unequal crown. Heavy load and mocking care shall from back and bosom part. Thought shall reach the thrill of prayer. Patience plan the dome of art. None shall praise or merit claim, not a joy be called by name. With a free, unmeasured tread shall we pace the cloisters through. Rest enfranchised like the dead, rest till love be born anew. Weary thought shall take his time, free of task work, loosed from rhyme. Pictures shall as softly look, as in distance shows delight. Slowly shall each saintly book turn its pages in our sight. Not the study's wealth confuse, urging zeal to pale abuse. Oh, my house is far away, yet it sometimes shuts me in. Imperfection mars each day, while the perfect works begin. In the house of labor best can I build the house of rest.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you up front, this sermon is radical and revolutionary. This sermon is going to make some people upset. This sermon is about hammocks. It's about napping. It's about rejecting everything extractive capitalism has taught you about work. I'm also going to tell you a secret in the spirit of transparency. I fell asleep while writing this sermon, like 6 or 7 times. In fact, I closed my eyes after typing that sentence and then snapped my eyes open again as my head nodded with drowsiness. So instead of forcing myself awake, I tried, but it didn't work. Instead of forcing myself to stay awake or downing a huge amount of caffeine so that I would be sure to get 0 sleep, I allowed myself to go to bed. I thought, maybe I shouldn't preach a sermon today. Maybe I should rest and let you all rest. What do you think? Take a nap? No, that's not what you're here for. That's not what I'm here for. So instead, I'm going to tell you why it's important that we rest when we need to rest, and to do that even when it's not convenient, even when we're expected to push on, even when it means saying no to things we've already agreed to. These last few years have been traumatic. We've lived through some really rough times. Maybe you've been raising children like I have and struggled to find any time at all to rest. Maybe you've lived alone and been struggling with loneliness and depression. Maybe you've lost loved ones. Maybe you've had COVID. Lots of us have now, especially recently. We've also been witnessing the decline of democracy and the rise of fascism in our country and the world. We've experienced the effects of climate change and witnessed the destruction of so many lives and livelihoods. There's a lot of distress floating around, and we are, almost all of us, struggling. I hope you've been taking the time to take care of yourself. Have you been resting? Have you been doing things that bring you joy? Have you done your spiritual practice to keep yourself in this present moment, not dwelling too much on the past? The authors of one of our readings, Charlie Wurtzel and Anne Helen Peterson, remind us that when you get a good night's sleep, you're better at basically everything. When you take rest days, you're a better athlete. The restoration we find in hobbies can make us better partners, better friends, better listeners and collaborators, just overall better people to be around. Hobbies help us cultivate the essential part of us that have been suffocated by the productivity obsessions and proliferating obligations. Now, it's important to remember that we are not meant to be productive all of the time. We are creatures of creativity and culture. And sometimes we're only able to appreciate culture when we rest. We're only able to be creative when we're given sufficient emptiness. In our story this morning, we saw the importance of rest and quiet. When we don't rest, when we don't take time to empty the cup, then it overflows, and we find ourselves beyond capacity. Sometimes this comes out as bad behavior, as rudeness, judgment, or dangerous driving. Sometimes it comes out as illness, as in Ellie's chalice lighting. We push too hard, and our bodies stop working. What's that saying? If you don't take the time to rest, maybe your body's going to make you rest. I recently heard a teacher say, I didn't know that the job, the stress, was making me sick until I was in the back of an ambulance. Our cultural expectations have been so warped by capitalism that we cannot see the ways that we buy into them. We cannot see the ways that our bodies are suffering because of the extractive nature of capitalism. Rest is resistance, says Tricia Hersey, creator of the NAP ministry. She goes on, capitalism was created on the plantations during chattel slavery, and is the same system that is driving the entire globe to exhaustion and a deep disconnection with our bodies and minds today. Tricia calls herself the NAP bishop and warns that this isn't a joke. This is about more than naps. This is about more than naps. This is about more than naps. This has been my battle cry, she says, and mantra since I created the Rest is Resistance framework in 2016. It has always been more than taking a full nap. My rest as a Black woman in America suffering from generational exhaustion and racial trauma always was a political refusal and social justice uprising within my body. I took to rest and naps and slowing down as a way to save my life. Resist the systems telling me to do more, and most importantly, as a remembrance to my ancestors who had their dream space stolen from them. This is about more than naps. It's not about fluffy pillows or expensive sheets or silk sleep masks or any external frivolous consumerist gimmick. It's about a deep unraveling from white supremacy and capitalism. These two systems are violent and evil, and history tells us this is our present living. This is shown. Rest pushes back and disrupts a system that views human bodies as a tool for production and labor. It's a counter-narrative. We know that we are not machines. We are divine. So when I speak of rest, I don't mean get more rest so you can be more productive. When I speak of rest, I speak of it as a radical act. I speak of rest as a reclamation. Reclaim your body as your own, not a tool of production. Reclaim your right to say no. When I speak of rest, I take into consideration the generations of Black Americans who were forced into laboring with their bodies long past their capacity. When I speak of rest, I consider the white families who profited off that labor. I think of my ancestors who likely owned slaves in West Virginia and the many Black folks who carry my father's surname, Scottish surname. I think of my northern ancestors who didn't own slaves, but they still profited off their labor, becoming wealthy from shipping cotton to and from the South. I think of the generations of people who still, to this day, benefit from the culture of white supremacy that made it possible to enslave, who benefit from the inequities built into a culture that breaks human bodies for the profit of the elite. Black bodies today are still used for labor, as prisoners in an unjust judicial system, as low-paid workers, and as folks who have to work 4 times as hard for success in a culture that doesn't value them. Black poet Sky Jackson writes this about one of her poems. One spring afternoon, not too long ago, I was in the business of selling Black bodies. These bodies, porcelain spoon rest mammies, are ugly remnants of our nation's antebellum past. As a Black woman working in a tourist gift shop in the French Quarter of New Orleans, I often thought long and hard about the things we must sometimes do in order to survive in a racist and capitalistic society. so insidious that it often demands we sell our very selves in order to survive it. So when I speak of rest, I speak of breaking systems of oppression. I speak of reclaiming our humanity. Reclaim your downtime for actual play. Do the things you enjoyed when you were a kid, when you had so much more downtime. Ms. Hershey goes on to say, you should read texts on Black liberation like Bell Hooks, James Cone, Toni Morrison, Katie Cannon, Audre Lorde, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And by centering this scholarship, you are respecting the work that has influenced and inspired everything about NAP ministry. You will begin the slow process of deprogramming your brainwashing under your grind culture. Go slow. Learn history. Learn your own history. We view our body as its own unique technology, and listen. This work is saving the lives of so many, and it saved my life, she said. This work should be respected as a balm for all humanity. Find ways to connect back to your body and mind. Find ways to intentionally slow down. Find ways to reimagine and snatch rest right now. It is your divine and human right to do so. It is your divine and human right to do so. Yet our culture is so steeped in productiveness that folks take the Christian sin of sloth to mean that one should never rest. Wendy Wasserstein even created a parody book on sloth in a series about the 7 deadly sins, a self-help book in the mode of many early 2000s dieting books on how to let go of everything, ignore all of your responsibilities, and lay in a hammock. The cover has a figure of someone just laying in a hammock. That's all they're doing. So, to honor the intention of the book, I read it while lounging lounging on the couch in my office. So, because I don't have a hammock yet, not yet. Although the book takes sloth to the extreme, giving up doing anything at all that takes any effort other than sleeping and reading and watching TV, it does speak to the need for folks to slow down. And although it is satire, there's actually some solid advice in there. She says, I suggest for once in your life, you make right choices. Any revolutionary from George Washington to Vladimir Lenin has famously said that the key to change is seizing the means of production. But I am saying this in a new way. I want you to seize the means of production in your own life and shut them down. I want you to seize the means of production in your life and shut them down. I want you to realize, probably for the first time in your life, that you have the right to be lazy. You can choose not to respond. You can choose not to move. She meant it as a joke, really, she did, but she's also right. You do have the choice to seize the means of production and shut it down. You do have the right to be lazy and not to move if it's what's right for you to do. This has been a valid form of protest for more than 100 years. Strikes shut down the means of production to make changes for the betterment of the worker. Unions are coming back more and more and more as people realize that they do have power when they come together to demand the right to rest, to demand the right to get paid enough to rest. What is life without downtime? What is life without rest and play and fun? As Wurtzel and Peterson explain, we love to talk about children's personalities, how unique and weird and joyful they are. We don't grow out of these characteristics so much as subsume them within duties. but they remain the building blocks of our humanness, the enduring difference between us and robots. We must preserve those inclinations and towards delight, towards whimsy, towards the ineffable and the unimpressive, the feelings you can't recreate with a machine or optimize for peak productivity. They are worth rediscovering, not because they allow us to rest and thus make us better workers, but because they anchor us to who at heart we have always been. So let us embrace rest, embrace play, and reclaim who we've always been. Amen. I invite you now to join in singing our closing hymn, Loosen, Loosen. The words will be on your screen. And now please rise in body or spirit to sing.
You may or may not know this song, but if you're one of those that doesn't, it'll be quickly learned by you. We're going to do it 4 times. So join in when you can. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
Let us embrace, rest, and play, and reclaim who we have always been. Go in peace.
Thank you.